Before I begin this video, I just want to apologise quickly for how I may sound in this video. I've been really sick for the past few days and it's really affected my throat, so I apologise if I sound a little weird at any point during this video. Hopefully it doesn't sound too bad. I am feeling a bit better today. I just thought I'd explain just in case I sound a little weird in this video at any point. But anyway, onto the actual video. With the arrival of X-Men 97 and my recent viewing of Batman the Animated Series, I thought it'd be a good idea to check out X-Men the Animated Series. It's a beloved series and regarded as one of the best superhero shows ever made. I mean, there is a reason that it's getting a continuation in X-Men 97 after all these years. So I was quite excited to start watching it, as I'd only seen a few episodes when I was a kid and had essentially forgotten everything. However, I've got to be honest, the show didn't blow me away like I was expecting it to. When I watched Batman the Animated Series, I could tell that I was watching an incredible show. Even its weakest episodes still retained a high level of polish. X-Men the Animated Series, on the other hand, didn't quite hit the same heights as Batman, and ultimately, I left the show with a lot of mixed feelings.
It'll be easier if you don't resist, and less dangerous.
Whilst this video may end up talking about X-Men the Animated Series a little more negatively than you may be expecting, I did actually enjoy this show. It did take some time, but this show did grow on me, and I think a lot of that is to do with this show's characters. The X-Men are an iconic group where even if you don't watch superhero content, you've heard of them and some of the characters. However, like the quality of this show, the primary characters in this show are a mixed bag too. Firstly, Jubilee could have been removed from this show and very little of substance would have been lost. She's often just kinda there during scenes, and it's no surprise that she hasn't really shown up much in X-Men media after this show. Then you have Jean Grey, who can't stop having orgasms every 5 minutes. Jean Grey didn't really strike the right chord with me in this series. She wasn't a bad character, but she was overshadowed in my opinion by all the other X-Men. But still better than Jubilee. I also didn't really like Professor X in this show. It may be because I've developed a very strict opinion on how Professor X should act after seeing him be portrayed by Patrick Stewart for all these years, but I found that Professor X would often act out of character in this show. Maybe his characterization in this show is more in line with his comic character than the movies, but when I think of Professor X, I think of a wise mentor figure. A lot of the time in this show, Professor X is that wise mentor figure, but every now and then, he just flies off the handle. I expected characters like Wolverine and Cyclops to argue with one another. I never expected Professor X to actually join in on those arguments too. Fortunately, I actually really liked the rest of the X-Men characters. I won't lie, Rogue did get on my nerves a little at the start of the show, but she's genuinely one of the best written characters in this show. She's an infamously tragic character. Some of the mutants in this show have really cool powers. Then you have someone like Rogue. Her powers are very strong, but they prevent her from being close to the ones that she loves. With just a touch of a finger, Rogue can take all the powers from any mutant, but it comes at the risk of severely hurting them or even killing them. Rogue is a rather upbeat character in this show, but every now and then you're reminded of how hard her life is, especially when it comes to romance. Also, this show does some interesting things with Rogue that you may not like. If you're familiar with Rogue's character, then you may be shocked to see her flying around and possessing super strength in this show. That's because in this show, Rogue has stolen all of Miss Marvel's, or as you may know her, Captain Marvel's strength, leaving Miss Marvel in a coma. It's another bit of tragedy to add to Rogue's character, especially as she didn't mean to put Miss Marvel in a coma. But all in all, like this show, Rogue really grew on me and I think she's a great character. I also love her close bond with Gambit. Gambit is a very popular character. Channing Tatum wanted to play the character for such a long time. I wonder if he'll actually get the chance to in Deadpool and Wolverine, since everyone is apparently in that. But regardless of that, Gambit is just a cool character. I won't lie, he's not one of my favourite characters in this show, and he also gets a very noticeable new voice for the final season, but he's just an undeniably cool character, from his interesting powers to his awesome character design. In fact, the character design is fantastic for every character in this show and one of the best aspects of X-Men the Animated Series. Well, until the final season, but I'll talk more about that later. Then there's Storm. I've never really been a big fan of Storm, she's just never clicked with me, although I really liked her in this show. She sort of acts like a wise older sister to the rest of the X-Men. In a lot of ways, she inhabits the role that I think Professor X should have. Yeah, she's not perfect, but she seems to get into less arguments than he does. She's also very selfless, often putting everyone else before herself. Her kindness and maturity really shine through in this series, and I was finally able to understand why her character is so popular, considering I haven't read too many comics with Storm in. Then you have the most famous of the X-Men, Wolverine. I don't know how, but Wolverine is one of those characters who seems to consistently get good character writing no matter what project he's in. And X-Men the Animated Series doesn't buck the trend. He is arguably the best character in this show. Wolverine has his own set of morals and ethics that often clash with the rest of the X-Men, yet his heart is always in the right place. Wolverine has led a very troubled life and carries around a lot of trauma within himself, but by being with the X-Men, he can finally put his more savage aspects to the side and begin improving as a person. Wolverine may occasionally act emotionally distant, but it's repeatedly made clear of just how emotional Wolverine actually is. He truly cares for the rest of the X-Men and clearly views them as family, even if he would never admit to that. Although I might consider Wolverine to be the best character in this show, he wasn't my favourite. Now that honour goes to Cyclops. I love Cyclops, and I've always felt a little disappointed by how he was handled in the movies, because he's a legitimately good character who never got his fair due, so I was ecstatic to see the series do right by Cyclops. He really does feel like the leader of the team, and I loved watching him make the difficult decisions in this series. Cyclops can often come across as cold, especially when he butts heads with the more emotionally driven Wolverine. I like that the show takes the time to show that Cyclops is just putting on a brave face and is just trying to do his best as leader. The weight of his decisions does take a toll on Cyclops, and he often needs to turn to Jean to discuss his issues, which acts as a great way of developing their relationship, and it's obvious how much the two care for one another. Although this series does feature the Wolverine, Jean Grey, Cyclops love triangle that I've never liked. Contrary to some people's beliefs, love triangles can be done really well. This is not one of those cases. This love triangle only serves to make Wolverine and Jean Grey less likeable, and only made me feel sorry for Scott. Fortunately, the series drops this aspect after a few episodes. Cyclops is a great character who I finally got to see get his fair due, which is weird to say considering the show came out years ago. It's not just the main characters I liked in the show, but a lot of the side characters too. For example, both Bishop and Cable were really cool characters, and I loved whenever they were brought into the fold. However, the side character that stands head and shoulders above all the rest has got to be Morph. I genuinely thought that Morph was an original character in X-Men the Animated Series, but apparently Morph appeared in the comics before this show, except Morph was called Changeling there. Morph went on a very wild and unexpected character journey in this show, which I won't spoil. The character is taken in so many intriguing and interesting directions, and since I'm assuming you'll be as familiar with the character as I am, it often results in Morph's character journey being an unpredictable one. Considering I had never heard of Morph before, I was shocked by how excited I would be to see the character show up in certain episodes. Lastly, I think the villains in this show are pretty good, especially Magneto. Magneto has always been a morally complex character, and luckily the show does his character justice here, with him occasionally trying to live peacefully with humans and other times falling into bad habits. What I believe a character like Apocalypse lacked in compelling characterization in this show, he more than made up for with his sheer presence. Apocalypse feels like a consistent thorn in the X-Men side, and even when you beat him, he comes back even stronger. He genuinely felt like a threat to our heroes, which made him a worthwhile adversary. However, I didn't like Mr. Sinister. I feel like he never got the best characterization in this show, and was often too easily bested in this show to feel like a legitimate threat. Perhaps I also feel this way due to playing the Deadpool game, and when I think about Mr. Sinister, I usually think about this scene.
Surprise! Ha! Got the little bitch this time, didn't we? Pose for the camera, Mr. Silly.
Although I do admit that I liked the episode where we got to see Mr. Sinister's backstory. It was the one and only time that he actually felt like a character. Now that we've discussed the characters in this show, how about we talk about this show's story? One of the reasons why the show has become so beloved is that it is in many ways an X-Men fan's wet dream. The show adapts so many comic storylines that you would never expect to see adapted. For example, this show even includes Cyclops' space pirate father. You heard that right, in the comics, Cyclops' dad is a space pirate. He's basically Star-Lord, and I was so surprised to see that actually come into play in this series. Not only that, but it wasn't a one-off thing either. Cyclops' dad made a couple of appearances in this show, or it's like how Mystique was Rogue's adopted mom in this series. I didn't even know that Mystique was Rogue's adopted mom in the comics. I thought it was something that they added to this show to give Rogue an extra layer of character. It's not just the main storylines of this show where the characters clearly adapted a lot of the comics faithfully. There is a multitude of Easter eggs and references that comic fans will surely enjoy. There is literally an entire episode where Wolverine teams up with Captain America, and you get brief glimpses of other Marvel characters like the Punisher and Deadpool. In my opinion, the best episodes of this show are the ones that involve time travel. There are a lot of episodes in this series that are dedicated to time travel shenanigans, and this is when I think this show is at its best. They are usually the more interesting storylines as the stakes are heightened and the show can go into more sci-fi territory. However, one area of the show that would sometimes feel weak to me is the dialogue. A lot of it could be a little too expository, like when Rogue reveals her backstory to the X-Men.
You know, I remember when I was 13, had me a boyfriend, till I kissed him. Poor boy was in a coma for 3 days. That was when I first realized if I touched anybody, I absorbed their strength right into me. Some power, huh? That's when the boys quit calling.
This feels unnatural because the other characters would already know all this about Rogue. This is purely a moment to tell the audience about the character, and so it feels quite heavy-handed. The other thing is that this series will show its age a lot through its dialogue. This is a 90s show that feels like a 90s show, with humour that feels like a fit for that era. In comparison, I would say that Batman the Animated Series has a timeless quality to it. The very 90s feel to this show and its dialogue might be a turn-off for some people. Luckily, the voice acting in this show is overall good and is able to elevate these weaker moments in X-Men script. And unlike Batman the Animated Series, this show, in my opinion, is able to provide a satisfactory conclusion. Let's talk about the more technical aspects of this show. First of all, what a fantastic theme tune. Even if you've never seen this show, you've heard the theme tune because it is incredible. I bet in 100 years, people will still be playing the X-Men theme tune because it is that iconic. The animation in this show can be good at times, but it definitely lacks the polish of Batman the Animated Series. There are multiple noticeable animation errors in this show. Usually you can ignore them and get over it due to this show's age, but there are quite a few of them. And I never once noticed any animation errors in Batman the Animated Series, though that may be due to X-Men the Animated Series' seriously low budget. Reportedly, the budget for X-Men the Animated Series was roughly half that of shows like Batman the Animated Series and X-Men Evolution. It's also one of the reasons why the animation in the final season had a very noticeable decline in quality. This is due to the animation studio Acom, who were able to do some work on the earlier seasons of the show, but by the final season they had been appointed the chief animation studio for X-Men the Animated Series. Interestingly, Acom also worked on Batman the Animated Series. However, the creators of that show considered Acom to be the weakest studio working on Batman the Animated Series and wanted to drop them as soon as they could. Truthfully, I don't even think the animation is that bad in the final season. I think it's more to do with the noticeable shift in art style and character design, as Acom had always struggled to replicate the intricate character design of the X-Men characters. Honestly, I'm glad that X-Men the Animated Series ended when it did, because if it had carried on with the art style and animation of season 5, then I think people would talk a lot less positively about this show than they do at the moment. However, X-Men 97 is on its way with at least 2 seasons worth of content that could hopefully carry on the strong legacy of X-Men the Animated Series. In some ways, X-Men the Animated Series was a disappointment, with its clear low budget, occasionally clunky dialogue, some weak characters, some bad episodes, and the fact that the animation nosedives into a volcano for the final season. However, I did like this show. It has a clear love for the source material, great character designs, an incredible theme tune, and good voice acting to go with some great characters. X-Men the Animated Series wasn't as good as I hoped it would be, but I did like it, and I do hope that X-Men 97 is able to carry the torch. I'm particularly excited to see what the show does with Cyclops, not just because I like the character, but also because he's voiced by Ray Chase. If you don't watch any anime dubs, that will mean nothing to you, but if you have seen some dubbed anime, then you'll know Ray Chase as the voices of Tengen from Demon Slayer, Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen, Puri-Puri Prisoner in One Punch Man, and Fyodor Dostoevsky in Bungo Stray Dogs. Basically, he's a really good voice actor, and I'm glad he's getting the opportunity to show his talent to a much wider audience. But anyway, what did you think of X-Men the Animated Series? Were you disappointed by it, or do you love the show? Who's your favourite X-Man? And also, are you excited for X-Men 97? Actually, I think by the time this video releases, there will already be a couple episodes of that show out. So if you have seen those episodes, then what did you think of them? Where does this cartoon stack up against other superhero shows? And are there any other animated superhero shows that I should watch? Like X-Men Evolution for example? Be sure to comment below. And whilst you're down there, please hit the like button. It significantly boosts this video in the YouTube algorithm. And if you're feeling up to it, hit the subscribe button too. I'm aiming to hit 1000 subscribers by the end of 2024. It's looking very doable. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.